Hi, everybody. I'm Claudia Bester. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Hammer Museum, and I want to welcome you all to the Billy Wilder Theater. It's so great to see so many people here who are interested in the natural world. Tonight, we're very happy to welcome Krystle Hickman back to the Hammer to celebrate the publication of her new book, The ABCs of California's Native Bees. We're going to start out with a presentation by Krystle, and after which she'll sit down for a conversation with the one and only Michelle Fullner of the Golden State Naturalist podcast. Krystle Hickman is a conservation photographer, National Geographic Explorer, TEDx speaker, community scientist, native bee educator, and artist based here in Los Angeles. She was a key part of the Hammer's Bee Week last October during the PST Art and Science Collide initiative, and I find her work incredibly inspiring. With all that's going on around us and the sometimes paralyzing overwhelm of it all, I think it's a really good time to focus on the mantra, think global, act local. And Krystle is hyper-local and doing huge things with very real and tangible impact, as you'll hear more about momentarily. I want to give a few plugs here. Please understand these are not meant to be shameless commerce, but it might sound that way. Krystle is going to be talking about native plant species during her talk, and I want to give a shout out to the nonprofit Theodore Payne Foundation, which is all about native plants and education and preservation, and it's also the best place in Southern California to purchase native plants and seeds. And today is the actual official publication date of Krystle's new book, as I mentioned, The ABCs of Native California Bees. So I want to plant it in your mind that an incredible way to celebrate Thanksgiving would be to thank the earth and all its creatures by planting some native plants this November. I also think a copy of Krystle's book combined with a potted native plant is the ultimate Thanksgiving or holiday gift this winter. So there, I said it. Also, another PSA, if you want to continue your nature loving this week, tonight is the Orionid meteor shower, which you may be able to see above you later this evening. I also want to celebrate that today the first of many California native plants were planted on the new Annenberg Wildlife Crossing over the 101 freeway, which is the largest wildlife crossing bridge of its kind in the world. So don't forget to take a moment and celebrate all the good things that are happening around us here in SoCal. So tonight we're going to hear from Krystle, and then Krystle and Michelle, and then I want to invite all of you to join us in the lobby for some light refreshments and a book signing. But now, please join me in giving a warm welcome to a woman and role model who I admire so much, Krystle Hickman.
Testing. Okay. Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I heard that the traffic was actually trafficking a lot tonight, so thank you for being in that. All right. So that was a really wonderful introduction. I was just standing backstage and absolutely love it. So thank you so much for the Hammer Museum for having me here, and also for everyone for coming out on a Tuesday night. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, besides what you just heard. I'm based in Los Angeles, California, but I actually travel all over the globe and photograph bees. So this photo here is actually clearly not California because we don't have pyramids here, but this is in Belize, and also this is a cloud forest in Colombia. So primarily what I do is I photograph bees alive. I also photograph the plants that they have relationships with, as well as the locations that they visit. So I actually visit each location year after year to document the changes in their populations, the plants, and if you actually go to a location year after year, you can actually document climate change, which is pretty cool. So this is how I got started. I don't know if anyone's seen this quote before. Yeah, if the bee disappeared off the surface of the globe, then man would only have 4 years of life left. No more bees, no more pollination, no more plants, no more animals, no more man. And that quote is attributed to Albert Einstein. So of the people who've heard that quote before, how many people know that's not true? Okay, a lot of people here. That's a lot more hands than I normally see. So when I first started out, I, like a lot of people online, saw that, thought it was true, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get really invested and involved, and I'm gonna save the bees. And by bees, I meant honeybees. So I went out and just with my cell phone. This was, I think it was a Samsung S6, so this is a really long time ago, but I took photos of bees, and it was just honeybees. Just a lot and a lot of pictures of honeybees. And then I took this photo, and it's clearly a bee, but it's not a honeybee. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. So ended up going back to the people who I thought at the time were bee experts, which were beekeepers, and I asked them what kind of bee this was, and they didn't know. So then, of all places, I ended up going to Facebook, which is, a very great place to get factual information. And there was a group there full of entomologists, and there was a subcategory of people there called milletologists, which are actually bee experts. And they pointed out to me that this is a native bee, not a honeybee. And they also told me that it was actually native bees that are the ones that are threatened or endangered. And it kind of changed my whole worldview, because I was like, I spent so much time photographing honeybees. Okay, I gotta change what I'm doing. So I feel like a lot of times there's confusion between what's the difference between a native bee and a honeybee. So I just made this slide to kind of talk about the differences. So first off, honeybees are only native to Europe, Asia, and Africa. The ones that are currently in the US are from Europe. Native bees are from where they currently reside. So they can be native to the entire United States in areas small as like California or even your zip code. They're also indicator insects. So the changes in population, like their decrease, increase, or just constant population, actually can indicate how healthy an ecosystem is. They can be generalist pollinators like honeybees, meaning they'll try and pollinate just about everything, but they can also be specialist pollinators. So they might only collect pollen from just one family of plants. It could be one genus or even one species. And it's thought that about 20 to 45% of native bees are specialist pollinators. So unlike male honeybees, native bees can mate multiple times without dying. Unlike female honeybees, they can also sting you multiple times without dying. But native bees usually don't sting as much, so you're going to be good there. They're also threatened by climate change, land loss, and disease. I'll get into this a little bit later. Approximately 2/3 are ground nesting, 1/3 are cavity nesting, and 9 out of 10 are solitary, so there is no hive or queen. So this is my very first, I call her my first milletologist bee friend. So in that group on Facebook, Olivia Carroll was brought up a lot, and I was like, let me just reach out to her. And because she has I'd say hyperfixation on bees, a lot of people like that, people don't reach out to them as much. So when someone is like, hey, I absolutely love what you're doing, let me talk to you. She was so enthusiastic, so excited. So we ended up becoming really good friends. We had a really long phone conversation. It's been years. I think it was 2018, the end of that year, that we first talked. And so she just a really great person. But it was actually through her that I first got these numbers. So how many bees are there in the world? There's over 20,000 bee species, and it's approximated that there's about 24,000. In the United States, we have about 4,000, or 20% of bee species. In Western United States, there's 3,000, and in California alone, Olivia actually counted, and she came up with a number, 1,643 species, which is about 8% of all bee species. So from that initial conversation, I was like, that's a lot of bees in California. And one of the very first things I thought was, I wonder if I can get every single letter of the alphabet in California. So I made a list, and this is a list I was never planning on sharing. I found it again last year, and it's so bad that I actually did not understand what I found again. But this is my first ABC list. And one of the reasons I actually wasn't sure what it was because I didn't know the difference between family, genus, or species. And if you actually look at the SB, it's Scopa, and the bee name is tibial scopa, which is actually not a bee, that's a body part. But I absolutely love this list because it just kind of shows that no matter where you start, it's kind of infinite where you can go. So this was, I think I made in August of 2018. And now there's a book out with like, I could tell the difference between family, genus, and species, which I think is really great. But also what's really interesting too, the EB here, this actually made it from my first list to the book, which I think is really amazing. Okay, so that brings me to the Crescent Farm. The Crescent Farm is where I would say my journey really started, or like unofficially. I had spent a lot of time after I found that first native bee looking for native bees at a lot of the same locations that I've been going to find honeybees, which was yards, parks, different areas. But I spent months and I couldn't find them, had no idea why. But the Crescent Farm, they actually posted quite a few pictures on their social media of native bees that they'd seen all in one day. And I was wondering, okay, why are there so many native bees here? This is kind of cool, so let me visit. And on my very first visit, I photographed these bees. And this is actually the A bee for the book. I think it's really cool that the book starts where I first started as well. But this is also where I made the connection that if you want to find native bees, you should look for native plants. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you guys know this. I was listening back and I see a lot of like really cool shirts and outfits out here. So everyone knows what a native plant is, but just in case. A plant is considered native if it occurred naturally in a particular region, ecosystem without human introduction. So plants can potentially have symbiotic relationships with native fauna, meaning they rely on one another to survive. Save the native plants also means save the native bees and vice versa. And saving native plants helps save so many more pollinators than just native bees, also birds, butterflies, bats, flies, etc. Also, photo from Theater Pane. I've heard a lot of you guys are very aware of them. And that brings me to my very first specialist pollinator. I was in the Mojave Desert. I do some astrophotography. As I was driving back, saw this plant, which is a Eriogonum inflatum, or a buckwheat, desert buckwheat, I think, and just pulled over to see what was there, and this little bee was there. These bees are called Perdita nasuta, and they're actually my very first contribution to science in multiple ways. These are the first photos of living representatives of their species, and if you look at this little feature right here, I call it like a duckbill, but it's actually called a clypeus. No one knew what that feature was for before I went there. And because I was out there photographing these bees alive, I actually was able to photograph them using the feature. So the male's in the back here. But what he's actually doing is holding the female's antennae on either side of his little clypeus duckbill to stop her from flying away so he can try and mate with her. And the reason why a lot of behaviors of bees aren't known is because of the way a lot of militology or bee science works. It's really, basically what they do is people put out pan traps. It's a bowl with liquid in it, and things that fly by will fly into it. They'll pass away. They're taken back to a lab and studied. It's a really great way to know a lot of information about bees, the size of them. We can do DNA barcoding with them, but it's not a great way to do behavioral science because clearly they're not alive. But yeah, I think with community science, it's really wonderful that there's more people going out there with cameras observing. It's a really great way to contribute, and I think anyone could get involved. One thing that is also really great about this plant is while I was there, I noticed that everything seemed to have the same coloration as the plant that it was visiting. So these are all on the Eriogonum inflatum. And what I think is really interesting about this as well is if this plant disappears, it doesn't negatively or positively impact people. But just because it doesn't impact people doesn't mean it's not important. It took possibly millions of years for these creatures to evolve and get to where they are today. So I think it'd be really great in the future, the present as well, if when people thought about nature, they didn't think of it so people-centric. All right, so clearly not a bee. But I feel like this is a really great way to highlight the connection between what's going on with climate change and symbiotic relationships. So I think it was 2019, 2020, there was a giant oceanic, what's it called, temperature gradient that happens every year, but because of climate change, it was really exacerbated, so it impacted this relationship. So what happened was Eastern Africa got a lot of rain, but Australia, there's a drought, and it created a lot of fires. Koalas rely on eucalyptus. That's what they eat to survive. So the koalas that survived the fire, they ran out of things to eat because the eucalyptus burned. But because koalas are so cute and fluffy, they're a lot of people's favorite animals, people rallied together to save them. The same thing is happening with native bees, but a lot of times when people think about them, they're like, oh, they're kind of scary, they chase me, they might sting me. So they're not doing the same thing to help them. So Santa Monica Mountains, I don't know if anyone hikes out there a lot. Yes. This is the Cistern Trail, so definitely visit it. It's one of my favorite places to go in, I'd say, early spring to summer. And it's a really beautiful biodiverse ecosystem, but because of climate change, it looks like this a lot of the year. It's a really amazing biodiverse ecosystem, and just because it looks really pretty, a lot of people like to move out there. And because of that, with climate change, there's a worry of fires. So I started visiting, I think in 2020 or 2021, and it was July of that year when certain people who lived in the area had asked a conservancy to go through with a tractor and cut down a lot of the native plants. This was an area that I've been visiting really regularly. It was just on the side of the road, a very small area where people turn their cars around. And when I came back there one day, this is what it looked like. And there were tire tracks. Everything was cut down. And this is actually where I photographed the QB in the book. So yeah, this is actually what's happening in a lot of areas because of climate change, but also impact from people. We're losing a lot of areas, and no one's really documenting it. But basically, I just want to show you guys some of the bees that have been in the area. I'd actually documented over 40 species of bees, and it's been years now, and none of the bees have returned. The tractors do come back every year, though. Also, habitat loss in farming. This is the Central Valley, what it looks like now. There's a lot of invasive plants, specifically grasses, but we also have coastal live oaks. This is what it should look like. This is Carrizo Plain. This was, I think, 2 years ago I photographed this. If I remember correctly, the grassland area, I think, had about 90% of the native plants in California at one time, so clearly reduced. And because of farming, the area, it's just very monocrop now, so it's not really a habitat. But this is my friend Don and his dog Lily. I don't know why I pointed out that's the dog, but but they're standing in front of a hedgerow. They actually, Don runs a farm called Terra Nova Ranch, and they're incorporating native ecosystems into the farming. So there's habitats there. And this is an elderberry bush that they actually seed bank from. This is one of the hedgerows. What's really amazing is there's just miles and miles of this. And this is in front of tomatoes, so there's a lot of native bees that show up. But one of the bees I wanted to highlight is this one. It's called a Perdita heliotropii. It's a heliotrope specialist. And what's really cool about this is they did not plant the heliotropes. Because there's birds probably visiting from other areas, they're seed dispersing. And one of the plants that showed up was this heliotrope. And because bees do travel sometimes looking for new areas to forage on, the bees ended up finding this farm, and there's a huge population of them there. I just think it's really amazing because the farm is not really an area you would think of for a native ecosystem. But I think this is a really good idea of what could possibly happen with the future of farming. Also, what can we do? We can join community or citizen science-led initiatives like BioBlitzes. Also, the City Nature Challenge is a really great one. We can also document to raise awareness, and of course, plant native plants. So one of the ways we can document, iNaturalist, is anyone familiar with that? Yeah, nice. So I created 2 projects here. One is called the California Native Bees. The other one is Los Angeles Native Bees. So you can actually go to either one of these projects. This is the California native bees, and if you see here, we have about 264,000 observations, a little under 500 species. Type in your zip code, you can see what native bees are native to your area, so look for them in your garden. Also, there is the Bumblebee Atlas. This is the 2024 survey or summary, so this is from last year. And I think this is a great program to get involved in because all of their information is through photography or live observations. So they don't do any killing of specimens, and it's a really great way to learn how to identify bees. Okay, so native landscaping. This is my friend Paloma and Levi's yard, and Paloma actually posted this photo on Instagram, and I had no idea she had a yard that looked like this, and it's just so amazing. So I was like, hey, can I come over? And of course she said yes. The very first day I was there, I photographed the ivy for the book, which is the Perdita interrupta. This is a rare / uncommon bee, and the first time I'd ever seen it, I've only ever seen it in one location other than this one, but she has a huge population. And what's really interesting about this bee is they have a relationship with California poppies. And if you're familiar at all with poppies, they produce pollen, but not nectar. So that means this bee has to have a relationship with two plants. So since the adults drink nectar, they have to visit another one, and a lot of them visit a popcorn plant or a cryptantha. And what was also really amazing is after I left, she was looking around the yard for more bees, and she found this bee, which is a Bombus crotchii. It's one of California's 4 endangered bumblebees. This one I actually photographed in the Santa Monica Mountains. She had a photo as well, but I just decided to share one of mine. So it's really cool. Not only did she have a rare bee, but she also has an endangered bee. So it's an example of what can happen in your yard if you plant native plants. And is anyone familiar with Jenga games? Okay, great, because I was talking to my mom about this presentation beforehand, and she had no idea. So I was like, is this just something I played by myself? But yeah, so I consider like an ecosystem is like a Jenga game. At the beginning of the game, it's really stable. All of the blocks are in place. But as you actually start to move pieces, it starts to destabilize. So what are the pieces? They're healthy soil, water, fungi, wasps, flies, spiders, things we don't necessarily like, as well as bees, butterflies, birds, healthy air. These things are all needed to create a healthy, stable game or ecosystem. So when you are gardening in your yard, it's really important to think of things that you might not necessarily want, like spiders and wasps, but they have really good benefit for the ecosystem that you're creating. Also, how to find native plants in your area. It sounds like a lot of you guys know already, but Theater Pane has a website that you can actually use here. You can look for plants that are native to your area, then you can also visit Theater Pane after and buy them. Audubon Society also has a website where you can actually put in your zip code, and it'll tell you what plants are native to your specific area. And I think, did everyone get a seed packet when they walked in? Nice. So I teamed with Hedgerow Farms to create a seed packet that I think would be wonderful, not just for bees, but for all pollinators. So it doesn't just have flowers, it also has grasses, which a lot of pollinators use to sleep on. So when you plant those plants this year, see what grows next year, take some pictures, tag me. I would love to see what grows in your yard. All right, thank you.
That's my cue, and I was so engrossed in her talk that I totally missed it. Sorry about that.
It wasn't a strong cue.
So I'd like to welcome the incredible Michelle Fullner. Michelle is an educator, California naturalist, parent of 2 woodland sprite daughters, and host of the Golden State Naturalist podcast, which is now ranked in the top 1% of all podcasts globally. Michelle holds a bachelor's degree in English and Comp Lit from San Jose State University and a master's in English, Comp, and Rhetoric from Cal State Sacramento. As an educator, she taught middle school and high school English in California public schools for 10 years. Go teachers. Before transitioning to her life as a full-time admirer of acorns, California newts, redwood sorrel, and tide pools, and I think California native bees. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Michelle Fullner.
Hi. Wow, it's so good to see everybody here. I'm going to pull up my questions. I promise I'm not texting. I don't want to look like I am, but I don't want to forget what I want to ask Krystle about either. But first of all, I just want to say, this is Krystle's publication day. Let's go. That is so exciting. And the culmination of such an incredible amount of work. So I am so happy for you. So proud to know you. So proud to be here with you. So
I feel the same way about you, by the way.
Gosh, I wasn't fishing, I promise. But I also love, I've heard a lot of bee puns, and I was watching from back there. They have a cool screen. You can watch what's going on from back there. I've seen a lot of bee puns, but I think this is my first time seeing befriended. That was great. That was a strong one.
Is that a good one? Okay.
I like that.
I was like, that might be kind of cheesy.
No, it's good.
Okay,
Keep it. Keep it in there. And I do want to get into, the content of your book and your work, but I also just want to start out by saying you recently, and you told me it was okay to share this, you recently shared with me that you have a sun allergy.
Yes. Yeah, I'm severely allergic to the sun.
And pollen?
Yeah, I'm basically just outside I'm allergic to. So yeah, if you see me outside, I basically I have sun gloves, I have a huge hat on, normally long sleeves, long pants. But yeah, I have a really horrible reaction to the sun.
Yes, and I mean, there are many, many impressive things about Krystle's work, but I think that just getting over the bar of your body is telling you to not do this.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to do it. So there's just another cool thing about this to know that that's what went into it. And I just really admire that. So, I mean, just way to go on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are so many, as you've gone out and braved the hot sun and braved the pollen and all of these things, right? We just heard in your presentation that there are around 1,600 species of California native bees.
Yes.
Which is amazing, and I think I've seen a very, very small fraction of those. But you've been out there looking for them since 2018, and you've seen a lot of them.
I have.
So I'm curious, how on earth did you decide which 26 to put in your book?
I actually used Discover Life initially, which is a website where it breaks down bees from all over the world, where you can actually just find basically all records of bees almost, I would say. So I initially went there, and then I just went to the places where the bees were historically found, looked for the plants that they had relationships with. But sometimes when I was just wandering around, I would accidentally bump into a bee that I wasn't even looking for.
Right, and there are so many cool stories like that in the book. I feel like as I was reading the book, I was like, it's like a bouquet of bee stories. Every chapter is this other novel bee story, and so many of them are about these species that have never been photographed alive, or that have not been seen alive for a long time, or that have never been photographed. It's just all these incredible things, and I'm just curious if there are any particular stories from that that kind of stand out to you.
Well, with you, I always talk about the MB with you, because I wouldn't have actually found the MB if it wasn't for Michelle, because the very first time we met, we went to a place called the Yellow Basin Bypass area, and literally just where we parked, there was a bee sleeping 2 feet in front of my car that no one had seen since the 50s. So it was just because we parked in the right spot, and also you wanted to meet me there. But yeah, it was a bee. I'd never even heard of the genus before, and it was a parasitic bee. And one thing that was really cool about it too was not only did I get the first photos, but there was really no information about it because people were pan trapping them. So no one knew what its host bee was. There were guesses of what it was, but no one really officially knew. So I was able to figure that out. Also expanded the range as well.
Yeah, it was not known to be in that area.
Yeah, yeah. And what's really cool about that area as well is since it's a plains area, I'd say like just the winter months, it's underwater. So it spends a good portion of its life developing underwater.
Okay, yes. I put this in my questions, and I was going to ask you specifically about the MB, partially because I get a tiny cameo in that chapter.
Yeah, her name's
I was
in
like,
the book.
ooh, I
Yeah.
got to talk about that one. But also because that chapter has so much that is kind of representative of, I think, a lot of themes that come up in your book. And so there's kind of a lot of things I wanted to tug on. And I think one of them is I'm really curious about this idea of parasitic bees. Because I think, parasites get a really bad rap. It's such a negative connotation, the word parasite. Like, that would be a horrible insult to call someone, right?
It would be, yeah.
But talk to me about parasitic bees, because are these, I think that our instinct would be to say, oh, these are bad bees. But talk to me about that.
No. Parasitic bees are some of my favorite bees. About 13% of bee species are parasites. So basically what happens with most of them is the female parasite will go into the burrow of a host bee and she'll lay an egg. That egg will hatch and then it'll either kill or consume the host bee's larva and then it'll eat up all of the pollen. So the female parasite or kleptoparasite doesn't have to do a lot of work besides laying an egg. But I think they're really great because for a lot of them, they're population control. So it's just kind of like in nature, if you like lions, you like gazelles, you wouldn't consider a lion a horrible creature because it's killing the gazelles. It's population control. Now, it's not universal for all bees, but I would say besides there are some parasites that are bumblebees as well, and they're not considered population control, but I'd say that applies for most other kleptoparasitic bees.
Yeah, and I love that there's just this ecological role, right? That everything that's there is playing some kind of ecological role, and we don't necessarily always understand what that's going to be.
Yeah, it should be about balance, I think.
Yeah.
Because if there is a healthy ecosystem, kind of like I was talking about before, like what you can set up in your yard, that's the same thing with these parasitic bees.
Right. And then my other question about these same bees in the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. Has anybody ever been there? This is a very NorCal kind of, yes, awesome. Some people have been there. But my other question about that is you already have mentioned this a little bit, but I drive over that, the causeway fairly frequently. I live in Sacramento. So if I leave and go to the Bay Area, I'm driving over the causeway. But it is flooded a significant amount of the year. How they're actually developing underwater?
Yeah, so female bees can actually line their burrows with a sort of waterproof material. Or the cocoons can also be waterproof. So they can actually sustain or survive underwater for a little while. There's actually quite a few bees that are underwater a good portion of their development, especially alkaline bees. The in bee in the book as well is also underwater a good portion of its life developing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I actually was just finding this out right now. I wrote this question. I was like, I don't know the answer to this one. We're going to find out together. But there's a few other things that I actually kind of want to double back because I want to dive more into some of the themes that come up in the MB. But even before that, to frame the conversation a little bit more and back up, you are so incredibly thoughtful about language, which is something that I really appreciate. I have been somebody who's been professionally interested in language for 15 years. And so I love that Krystle is so aware of language and choices, word choices. And so, for example, you use the word community science and scientist instead of citizen scientist. And I'm wondering if you'll talk about that and if there are any other examples of language choices that you're aware of.
Definitely. So does anyone else here know the difference between citizen science and community science? No, okay. So they're pretty much the same thing, except I would say in the last few years, especially in the English-speaking world in the U.S., the word citizen has changed a lot from, meaning from someone who didn't have a degree necessarily into what they're studying, but their status, if they're documented or not. So to be more inclusive, a lot of people, me included, have started using community. So we include those people whether or not they're documented, because honestly, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't think it really should matter if you're contributing. But yeah, I think language a lot of times evolves a lot faster than the definition in a dictionary. So this is just one way to keep up with the way language is evolving.
Yeah, and I like that you're part of that conversation and kind of pushing that along. And I think something else that we've talked about is like possessive words.
Yeah, that actually kind of, I know people do it unintentionally, but a lot of times people say our native bees or our ecosystem, or they talk about bees or just anything in the ecosystem as if they're a possession. So I normally say the or the plants they visit. I keep things very neutral just because they're not a possession. They're just something that lives alongside us. So I feel like it's very subconscious, but words do hold a lot of meaning. So if you are subconsciously saying our, like it belongs to us, this is mine, I feel like that does sort of change the way you feel about things.
Well, yeah, and it's like almost hierarchical.
It is.
Right? Because
yeah.
it's like if I possess this thing, it's
Yeah.
like my iPhone. Right?
Exactly.
It's a different relationship.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they're independent of us.
Right, absolutely. And they're contributing. They're in their own ways, completely apart from what we're even aware of. And you're finding things out all the time about them.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about them too. Because like when I go out in the ecosystems that they live in, if you sit with them, you start to notice they have habits. Like male bees, they're really funny. They seem to have like little commutes that they're on. So you could sit by this like little bunch of flowers and they'll just keep going around the same pattern over and over, hoping a female bee will show up. And if one doesn't and they get tired, they like this specific flower and they just perch on that flower. And that's sometimes why I get photos of them so well, because I know they're going to go back to that flower because that one's a good one for some reason.
So you can learn these patterns and then be able to anticipate their behavior a little bit.
It is. And I really like going back to locations over and over, because if you do actually spend a lot of time looking at them, you can recognize individuals and you'll see them day after day. The first time that happened actually was at the Crescent Farm. There was a grasshopper. What are they called? Graybird grasshopper or something like that. Yeah. She was just hanging out on this bush for like a month. She had a favorite stem. And then one day she was just gone. And I was there for like her part of her life cycle. And it was just kind of cool being there and experiencing that with her. And she was really scared of me like the first couple of days, but then she started ignoring me because she was like, oh, you're interested in the bees. Not me.
Yeah,
So,
she like recognized you too, got used to you
maybe,
too.
I don't know, but yeah.
Maybe that's reading too much into it. Nobody
She
come at
stopped
me
being
for that.
scared, so I don't know. But I do think they're like smarter than a lot of people realize.
Right. I mean, they've survived this long, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not by accident.
Yeah, and you know what? They develop skills too. So like buzz pollination, there's a lot of bees that actually do that. They'll go to a flower, they'll buzz at a certain frequency, and it'll release pollen. If you go there at the beginning of the season, a lot of them are really bad at it. But if you go at the end of the season, they get better. So it's just practice.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
And there's because something that is like so core to me is learning, right? Like the ability to keep on learning.
Yeah.
And I think that really ties into a lot what you do, because as a community scientist, you have gone out and learned so much on your own with the help of scientists, kind of weaving all of this knowledge together. And now, for the past few years at least, you've been starting to share that knowledge pretty extensively. You've become this powerhouse of a science communicator in your own right. And I'm curious, maybe this relates a little bit to some of those bee behaviors that you're talking about, but I'm curious, when you talk to people about bees, what is it that is something that maybe catches people's attention or surprises them? Or what is something that kind of comes up a lot where it really resonates maybe with audiences?
I think the big one is the fact that bees sleep. So
it's so cute too.
Yeah, it's just such a simple behavior.
Behavior. I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop now.
Behavior. Oh my gosh. But yeah, just like the fact that they go to a certain bed that they tuck themselves into, like actually, I don't think I showed any photos up there, but some of them sleep in mallows. They'll go to the same mallow every single evening, and it'll close around them when the sun sets, and it'll open when the sun rises. Or there's certain sunflowers. I know some people will see this in their yard. They'll start to notice the same bees returning day in and day out. Also, aging. I think that's really cool too. I call them elder bees. I don't think that's their official name, but I feel like it's a good one. But yeah, bees go bald as they get older. Their wings can get tattered. Sometimes they'll lose antennae, but yeah, people can identify with them because like a lot of us go bald too. So, hey.
It's tough to keep up with all this, man. It's, the bees are experiencing it too. There's a certain amount of comfort in that.
Yeah, yeah.
And the flower thing is very like Fern Gully. Anybody like another 90s kid, you ever watch that? That feels very like sleeping in a flower. That's such a dream. That's such a fantasy.
I would love to sleep in like a giant flower.
Absolutely.
It just seems so cozy.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, and I think that it's really cool that people are surprised to see how much we have in common with bees. And I wonder if, we're even going to keep on discovering more and more things. Like this idea of them learning.
Oh, yeah. I definitely think just not even just bees, just nature, just going outside even in your own yard. There are so many things that we don't know, specifically with insects, just because of the way we study them. We're getting more and more behavioral information about them, but it's been centuries, I guess, of just not looking at them alive or not thinking of them as sentient. I don't want to anthropomorphize them so much because I feel like a lot of times people don't like that, even though I do it. But yeah, I think of looking at them as individuals and just understand that they can be. Yeah. I don't know another way to say that.
Yeah, I do feel like there's kind of this tension, right, in like science and science communication of like, how much do I humanize something, right? It's not like you don't want to humanize it because it's not a human.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that if we separate ourselves too much, we can lose something very fundamental about who these beings are, right? That they have an identity.
Beings, yes. Yeah.
You can't avoid it.
I think that was on purpose. But yeah, and I also don't want to undervalue the way militologists have been doing their work or entomologists for decades, because it is through collections. Honestly, the work that I'm doing right now, I wouldn't have been able to identify a lot of these bees. So I do want to highlight that it is definitely important work that people have been doing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that it's really great to have that foundation to work on.
Yeah.
And then the way that you are contributing to it in a completely new way, like with the bee behaviors and being able to see these things that you cannot observe in a non-living organism. And so I think that kind of brings me to my next question, which is about your photography, because I think that photography plays such an integral role, not only in being able to document behaviors and expand the science of what is known about these bees, but then also to go back to the previous thing we were talking about and to say we're now able to communicate this better. Because how many people can go and look at a little dead bee that's pushed into the, pin card or whatever, versus how many people can go online or look at this book and see these photos. So I'm really curious kind of what the role has been of photography, which is so important to your work. What's been the role of that, and what's been kind of the impact and the resonance with people that you've seen with the photography?
Yeah, I think as far as personally, just going out in nature and actually watching them, I feel like learning their behavior is one reason why my photography has gotten so much better, because I've started to understand where they like to nest, what flowers they like to visit, what times of day they like to be out, different temperatures. Just things like that has really influenced my photography, and just to capture it and just to be able to predict where they like to go and see them as individuals. And then for other people, I would say just seeing them alive, I feel like is very impactful to people. Seeing also size references is a really good thing. Yeah. I put a lot of size references. But yeah, I feel like it also gets more people involved in science, because a lot of times the way people think of science is you're in a lab somewhere in a lab coat, looking under a microscope, and a lot of people are like, well, that's not me.
Right.
And at the moment, that's not me. But
Well, there's such a large barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Right? Like that is an incredible commitment if you're going to go out and become one of the lab coat people.
Yeah, there is it's years. It can also be a huge money investment, and if you have if you have family and things that you're working on otherwise, it's something that could feel impossible. But if you have your cell phone, if you have your camera, you can go out and do the exact same things.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so much credit to the people with the lab coats because,
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't also do what I do without them, right? Like it's
Yeah.
incredible and this amazing amount of knowledge that we're able to kind of tap into and spread and learn, and it's just incredible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love this role of community science that you have really just taken and run with. So for those of us curious about community science and what maybe, you talked a little bit about specific ways to get involved, all these iNaturalist programs, things like that. I'm also curious, what do you think are maybe some attributes? What makes a person a good community scientist? Like what are some qualities that somebody should develop if they want to be a community scientist, do you think?
There's no universal quality. It's so different for everyone, but I've noticed hyperfocus is really helpful. Also, I just being neurodivergent helps as well. But yes, but yeah. Also, if you enjoy being outside, honestly, it could just be that simple. If you have a garden and you like sitting, watching the sun move across the sky, you enjoy your flowers. It's really simple. Like there is really no barrier to entry. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's really anything universal just besides like going outside and watching things.
Okay, it's for
really,
everyone.
It's really
Even
simple.
if you're allergic to the outside world, you can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say one thing that's too, it's made me really connect with myself and people in such like more positive ways. So when I initially started this, I was just basically by myself all the time. If I would go out to the desert, I would be like, okay, I got to go out at sunrise, and it's like a 4-hour drive. So let me wake up at 1 and drive 4 hours. And I was doing that for years by myself, and then started posting on Instagram, and then all of a sudden people wanted to join me, which is amazing. I think one of my friends, Hollis, is here. She sat with me one day for like 6 hours looking at bee holes, and she had a great time, or bee burrows, sorry. Yeah, it's just, you make really great connections with people as well.
Yeah, and I like that too because I do feel like, it's hard to start something sometimes, but if you can be the person to start it, right? You kind of get that momentum going and then it becomes something that other people want to get involved in too. And I love that. And I love that you've got these projects on iNaturalist that gives people that way in to contribute. You've got friends coming along with you to look at these places and these species out there.
Definitely.
And I absolutely love that. And I think that I want to get into maybe just, this is like a little bit sadder, and you talked a little bit about some of these things. Some of the things that are maybe threatening native bees, because I also want to get a little bit more into what we can do to help them. So a little bit about what are the things that you see most regularly being the biggest threats to native bees right now?
I would say the easiest one to observe is land loss. I think that is a huge one, and that was actually just a massive issue with this book. So I said before, I was going to discover life to locations where bees had previously been seen, and sometimes there was just a neighborhood that wasn't there before, or a building. So these bees were just gone from the areas, or it could have been farming as well. But I think a few years ago, land loss was actually eclipsed by climate change. And we all remember the fires that happened earlier this year, but that was a mix of climate change and also human involvement and invasive species like grasses taking over. But yeah, I would say it's a combination of land loss, climate change, and invasive plants.
Too many of those Jenga pieces.
There's too many, yeah, and they're just destroying and habitats. And sorry, I was kind of wandering off. I forgot the question. What was the question?
I forgot too. It was about the things that are a threat to native bees.
Yeah,
I think you covered a lot of them there.
Yeah, and then also I would say competition between honeybees as well, especially when there's loss of land, when there's a lot of drought. sometimes you won't see that competition as much. But when there's fewer resources for these bees to visit, honeybees will just like swarm over everything, and it takes a lot of the resource, not just from native bees, but from also a lot of other pollinators as well. So I think I read a study a while ago, but when there's honeybees out in nature, I think there's about a 2-mile radius from a beehive where you'll see a pollinator decline.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in especially Southern California, we just have a lot of honeybees.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, you're talking about land loss. And I think that ties back actually to language, because you mentioned in one of your chapters the idea of a vacant lot, right?
Yes.
And I think that it's such a problematic thing, right? So talk to me about vacant lots.
I visit a lot of vacant lots. Actually, okay, this one's not in the book, but it's one of my favorite vacant lots. It's in Apple Valley. There's a bee called a Perdita minima, which is the smallest known bee in North America. It's about 2 millimeters, and it just looks like a dirt lot. Like, it seems like there's nothing there. But there's this plant called I can't remember the scientific name, but it's a desert sand mat or a white margin sand mat. And it's maybe like 2 square feet. And this bee's entire life is just on that plant. But it's not just the bee. You see like little spiders as well. You see mites, you see ants. And
I mean, if
seems
you're
so
2
empty.
millimeters, then 2 square feet is like the whole
That's
world.
really
Like, that makes
huge.
sense.
Yeah, but it's just when you look at it, it looks like nothing's there. You might go, oh, there's a little weed. But if you lay down like I do in the desert, lots a lot, you're like, oh, there's a lot going on right here. And yeah.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think I'm going to add to your definition of a community scientist can be anyone, but I think that a through line that I see with your work is just this curiosity, right? Where you're like, okay, here's this random what anyone else would look at and see a weed, but I'm going to actually get curious about that weed, and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to lay down on the ground and have this moment of like connection and wonder.
Yeah, and I think this is also in the green room. We were having this. We started like with a question, and then it led to more questions.
Oh,
and then
yeah. We were talking about horizontal gene transfer. This is what we talk about for fun.
Yeah, but it's basically you go out in nature, you have one question, and then it just keeps like compounding, and it's a whole puzzle, and you may never solve it, but it's just really fun asking the questions and possibly finding things out and just expanding your knowledge.
Yeah, you actually have I wish I had written this down, but you have like a formula for this at one point in your book where it's like, observe something research. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Because I do that a lot. So yeah, actually with the MB, let's go back to the bee with
let's
you,
go back
for
to the
example.
MB.
So that was a bee, I couldn't even ID it to genus initially. So one of the ways that you can actually ID bees is they have cells on their wings, and you specifically look at these 2 called submarginal cells. And if you're like, I don't know what bee this is, let me just compare. And I was comparing it to so many bees, could not figure out what it was. I kind of guessed what family it was in. And this is where you like run into people who are in the lab all the time because they look at so many specimens. And they were like, this bee actually, its wings are so specific. It's not even the genus, it's the species.
Wow.
So you can ID this bee to species from its wing. So just things like that.
Yeah, and that comes from observing it and asking questions and then doing this research later on.
Yeah, and then there's just other people involved as well, too. Like, I feel like a lot of the work I do, I wouldn't be able to accomplish if there weren't those people in labs who've been there years before me.
Yes. Thank you again to the lab coat folks and friends out there. And I really love that you've broken it down into these sort of 3 pieces, because I feel like what I'll try to do is I'll try to do them all at once. And that's my mistake, where I'll be like out there looking at the bee and Googling it at the same time. And it's like, no, observe it, and then figure it out later.
It also helps, too, that there's like no reception in a lot of the
that does
places
help.
where I am. So, yeah. Actually, there was this, what was it? The Y bee. I actually misidentified the bee initially and the plant that it was visiting. And I was like, I couldn't find the plant because I like had misidentified it, but I also didn't have service. So I ended up driving about like 4 miles down this dirt road and got one bar and completely wrong plant.
Oh, wow. So then once you knew the plant, then you had a better idea of the bee.
And then it was there. So, But yeah,
Is that a specialist?
it is a specialist.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you know the plant and you know that this bee needs this particular plant.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. I love that it's also like this logical puzzle that you're constantly trying to work
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and honestly too, like after doing it for a few years, it's kind of rinse and repeat with a lot of the steps, but still there's like just amazing new discoveries to be had that kind of like are shocking,
Yeah.
which I
constantly.
absolutely love.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what I see in new species as well. That's one of my favorite things.
I mean, that's got to be magical.
Yeah, or get a photo of something that's never been photographed alive before. Because I think in the book there's 7 bees that are the first photos of a living representative of their species.
I felt like I was like seeing it every other page. I'm like, there's another one.
Yeah, and I'm kind of proud of that, but that's also pretty cool too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would be so proud of that.
yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to get to, we talked about some of the things threatening native bees. And you mentioned earlier that some of the things we can do to help native bees. And I wanted to get a little bit more into the native plants aspect of this.
Definitely.
So yeah, talk to me about like native plants, why they are important to native bees.
Yeah. So again, land loss, one of the leading causes for decline in native species. A lot of us have yards, and this is land that we can utilize not just for native bees, but for whole native ecosystems. And to save the native bees, you do need to save the ecosystem. So a lot of that involves plants. So developing bees or bee larvae, they eat pollen. Adult bees consume nectar. So a lot of them will have relationships with specific families, genera, species of plants. And if those plants are not available, then they don't have a resource to thrive and survive on. So that's why I think it's really important to start out if in your own yard, if you have one, to just recreate an ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I've heard Doug Tallamy actually say, the author of Nature's Best Hope, Bringing Nature Home, The Nature of Oaks. You've read all these books, right? I think those are their names. But I've heard him say in a presentation that like bees don't specialize on nectar because nectar is essentially sugar water. It can have some variation, right? Different amounts of sugar in the water, different concentrations, but the pollen.
Yeah, the pollen is what they specialize. So when they have specialist relationships, it is specifically the pollen. So like the California poppy bee that I was talking about before in my friend Paloma's yard. So they have to collect the pollen from the poppies for the developing larvae.
That reminds me of my kids being like, these are not real Cheez-Its. They 100% know, and they won't eat them.
Are they the ones from like Whole Foods?
Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, anything that's got like whole grain, or is it all healthy or has actual real cheese in it? We're not doing
I
it.
could go on a tangent about that because I've been trying to eat healthier and going to Whole Foods and like those snacks sometimes. Yeah.
It's not quite the same.
It's not. No.
Why does hydrogenated oil taste so good?
It is really good. Yeah.
But we can get away from that now. I got a little excited about that metaphor. But I also want to talk about, so if we've got these specialist bees, right? They're specializing on this particular pollen. And there's also something known as a keystone plant, right? So keystone plants are these plants that are a small percentage of plants that are serving this like outsized number of species, whether it's caterpillars or bees. And so lots of them rely on these things. And so Doug Tallamy also has this thing where he says that if you help the generalist bees, if you help the specialist bees, you're also helping the generalists. What do you think that he is saying there? Like, why is helping this specialist bee that eats this one particular scorpion weed plant, why is that helping other bees as well?
I think one of the main ways is if you plant a specialist plant, you are possibly creating a habitat for multiple things to visit on that might not have the same specialist relationship with it. So kind of like I was talking about at the farm where they planted certain plants to attract certain individual wasps or bees. Other plants showed up because there were birds visiting and they were doing seed dispersal. So it was expanding the habitat on its own. So that could be a way that you could definitely look at it because really you can't create a habitat with just one plant and one creature.
So having multiple native plants with different bees that specialize on them is also going to help. What did you say? It's like 25 to 40% of bees that are
Yeah,
specialists?
good memory. Yeah.
I mean, you had it in the presentation.
Oh, okay,
I'm
yeah.
just cheating. I just saw it. And so if you plant the plants that those bees need, then the other bees can use them as well.
Yeah. And again, not just the bees, but yeah, the flies. I love flies as well, too. There's some really cool ones. Also wasps.
Flies get so much hate because of house flies, but there are
Yeah.
so many cool flies out there, which we could
yeah.
totally get
Yeah.
into a whole fly conversation. Hoverflies, or like the flies at Mono Lake. It's just some incredible.
Oh, what are they called? The Rapo.
Oh, gosh.
Mighty Actin
Pop
ones
quiz.
that look like
don't know.
shrimp, kind of, with green eyes.
Well, yeah, and they have this whole life cycle where they're like underwater for part of the life cycle, and then they emerge. It's like wild. Look this up. I'm messing it all up, but it's super interesting. All right, and then I wanted to dive in too. You've got some of these keystone plants that support a lot of pollinators in the seed packet that looks like the book. And so some of them are like the gum weeds, which my friend is like, we're going to rebrand it as gum plants. We're not going to call them gum weeds. So I'm going to try to call it gum plants. But we've got those in there. And then the
Sunflowers, Phacelia is another really great one.
okay, so there's some good like keystone plants already in there. And I'm curious too, like, because we normally think of bees with flowers, but we've also got our state grass is represented in there. Stipa pulchra, purple needlegrass. It's California state grass. What are bees using grasses for?
A lot of them use it to sleep on. The very first year I started, and I was not great at photography, I would purposely go early morning or late evening and look for grasses, dry grasses. And I would see clusters of Anthophora bees, like digger bees, or the Melisotis bees, the longhorn bees. They would cluster on grasses or dry plants to sleep on.
Some of my favorite photos in the book are like this, actually. And they're like, it's like this stem, and I'm assuming it's grass, and it's got like this row of like sleeping bees on it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
They're such beautiful pictures.
Yeah, I think that was, again, it was the A-bee again at the Crescent Farm. And I think it was Bouteloua gracilius, which is a really great native grass for sleeping insects. I've also seen a lot of wasps and flies on them, butterflies as well.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like they just know exactly what to do with it.
They keep going back to the same plants night after night. And what's really cool, too, is I first realized this at the Crescent Farm. Year after year, they go to the same patch of grass. And it's not the same bees, it's their descendants. But I don't know if it's a smell or something, but they just go to the exact same patch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there are so many cool things, right? And I feel like I want to dive into this whole conversation about like, more about bee behaviors. But then we won't have time for Q&A. And I do want to make sure to leave time for Q&A. But first, I want to hear a little bit of the book. So can we get a little reading here too?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
By the way, I'm very nervous for this. It like takes me back to high school. So, all right.
Popcorn reading.
Oh my gosh.
Anybody have to do popcorn reading?
Yeah. Predicting what paragraph you were going to read and then like practicing it in your head and like, okay.
I stopped doing it as a teacher for that reason, but.
Okay, cool. All right. So this is the introduction. It's the last 2 pages of that. Native bees can serve as indicator insects, meaning their presence, absence, or changes in numbers can often be the first signals of issues in an ecosystem, such as climate change, pollution, or habitat loss. In terms of pollination, only female bees possess structures to collect pollen, as they are the ones that construct nests in which their offspring developed. Yet males are also good pollinators. When they're visiting flowers, some plants seem to be preferentially pollinated by sleepy male bees. Female honeybees are generalist pollinators. They'll try to visit just about any flowering plant. However, they're often not as effective at pollinating plants in natural habitats as native bees are. Native bee species have evolved traits, behaviors, and even physical adaptations suited to their locations, resulting in higher efficiency in pollination. While native bees can also be generalist pollinators, many are specialist pollinators, meaning that the females collect pollen from only one type of flower, like Asteraceae, which includes sunflowers, daisies, asters, and allies, to feed their offspring. They've evolved alongside those specific plants and so often serve as highly effective, highly specialized pollinators. Unlike female honeybees, who can only sting once before they die, female native bees can sting multiple times without dying. However, they rarely sting. Male bees don't have the ability to sting because the stingers evolved from the ovipositors, i.e. egg-laying organ, which are body parts belonging only to females. Similarly, while male honeybees die after mating, most native bee males have the ability to mate multiple times without dying. Approximately 2/3 of native bee species construct their nests underground, and 1/3 construct their nests in above-ground cavities such as holes in wood. The way native bees live and interact with each other varies greatly. 9 out of 10 are solitary, while others live in a colony founded by a queen. Some even live as parasites in the nest of other bees. Male bees are focused solely on mating and don't contribute to the rearing of the young. So it's the females who create the diverse social systems in the bee world. Throughout this book, I'll introduce each bee species by both their scientific and common names initially, but from there, I'll exclusively use their scientific names. One of the main advantages of using scientific names is that they're universal and precise. So using scientific names helps us communicate about bees in broader circles in ways that common names simply cannot. A scientific name is part of a classification system called taxonomy that categorizes and organizes organisms hierarchically. I hate that word. There are 8 main taxonomic categories for classifying organisms: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. The further down you go in the categories, the more specific you are about the identity of an organism. For example, humans have the common name human, but our scientific name is Homo sapiens. Homo is the name of our genus, and sapiens is called the epithet, which together with the genus is the name of our species. The aim of this book is to engage adults and children alike, sparking excitement towards these very charismatic creatures through story as well as landscape, plant, and macro photography. You will learn about the unique habitats where these bees have evolved and still reside, and the native plants with which they have relationships. This is a journey you can take with me through one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, California. There are over 20,000 species of bees in the world, close to 3,000 species native to Western North America, and over 1,600 in California alone. We, meaning the scientists who study them, farmers who use them, and gardeners who enjoy them, still have much to learn about these prolific pollinators. Native bees would benefit from more people joining the effort to spread awareness about them. What is happening ecologically in California is a reflection of what is happening around the globe. Climate change, human development, the collapse of biodiverse ecosystems, and so much more. There are more bees native to the state of California than countries like Argentina or France. The number of native bee species in California is almost on par with the entire continent of Australia. Each letter in this book corresponds with the first letter of the epithet of a bee species native to California. As you journey through the alphabet, each letter, and in turn each bee, brings forth a story of discovery, natural history, and need for conservation. Join me in exploring the many habitats of these native bees, from low deserts to mountain peaks and everywhere in between. Together, let's celebrate their resilience and ensure they have a future buzzing alongside us.
I think that kind of does such a great job of inspiring our enthusiasm and just gives the tiniest hint of the incredible diversity of bees that we have here. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to open it up now to any audience questions. And there are ushers who will come around with a mic and give you the mic so that everyone can hear your question. So go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to ask one.
Hi.
Hear the other questions.
Hi. You mentioned that Einstein said something about bees that wasn't true, but you didn't explain why it's not true.
Okay, sorry for that. So actually, the quote was actually made in the late 1990s. And if you're at all familiar with Einstein, he actually passed away in 1955. So there's kind of a gap in between him passing away and saying that quote. So it was actually just a complete internet invention, and then someone put his name on it. So the breakdown for it is actually specifically about honeybees and pollination. So I guess the people or the person who made the quote didn't really understand that there are more pollinators than just honeybees. So that's kind of the explanation for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I saw another. Oh, there's so many hands. Oh my gosh. Ushers have got their jobs cut out for them.
I have to go back to my notes. So let me see. Thank you so much for this incredible conversation, Krystle. It's so inspiring. Let me say that again with the microphone. Thank you so much, Krystle, for this conversation. It's very inspiring. You had talked about the California poppies and how you had mentioned, Perdita, on the California poppy, that they have the pollen, not the nectar, and that there's another plant, that Caramtantha, that they need to have growing next to them. Is that right? I just wanted to make sure I got that name correct.
Yeah.
Can you explain that more?
Definitely. So actually, one thing that was really interesting about that bee, it was called the California poppy bee. So really good question. Yeah, the poppies only produce pollen, not nectar. And I feel like this has probably been expanded on more since I've actually started researching them, but it was documented that the only plant that they collected nectar from was Cryptantha, or the popcorn flower. But I've actually seen them even visiting like marigolds or different asteraceae as well. So I don't know if it's just maybe limited access to those two flowers being next to each other that they've had to look for resources elsewhere, but they definitely do collect nectar from other plants as well. No problem. And you project really well too, so I didn't need the mic.
Yeah, I thought the mic was picking up on you for a second there.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the conversation. You mentioned that between honeybees and native bees that male and female bees have different roles. Why do you think that is?
Well, the male's main purpose is just reproducing, which they're basically just on the lookout for females. Females have, I'd say this is across the animal world as well, not universally, but they have developed physically structures to carry pollen internally, sometimes, most of the time externally. So I guess there's really not a need for like the males to do anything other than just mate with the females, because yeah, it's the females who dig the burrows that their offspring will nest in. They create separate cells. They also they can control the order of male versus female eggs that they're laying. So they'll typically lay females closer to the back, males closer to the entrance. So that means that males will actually emerge first. And I haven't actually seen this in writing, but it's my thought process. They emerge first so they can kind of disperse and not mate as much with their sisters, hopefully. But yeah, there so far hasn't really been a need for the males to do much else. I have actually heard in conversation with someone verbally, I haven't seen it written down, but I have heard that there are some bumblebees that actually help incubate the eggs. So this could possibly be, based on what we know now, there could be a lot more that we need to expand on as far as knowledge behaviorally.
Hi. Are there any native species of plants that you've planted in the hopes of seeing a sighting of a bee that you haven't yet seen?
So I live in an apartment, so not personally. A lot of the bees that I haven't seen are really rare bees that you would see on a mountain range or in a desert. However, like we were talking about before, the California poppy bee, that's one bee that has a symbiotic relationship that you would look for. The bees that I would say that would be more rare that might show up in your yard are a lot of Perdita bees. And you could plant things like Phacelia. Depending on where you are, if you're in their range, they might show up. But personally, if I had a yard, I would plant things like native grasses. I would plant sunflowers. I would plant Phacelias, a lot of different Asteraceae, and attract those generalist pollinators. And then kind of what I was talking about before, through seed dispersal, maybe something will naturally show up. But I personally wouldn't plant looking for a symbiotic relationship. I'd look for generalists.
Thank you.
So you talked a little bit about land loss and fire conservation, and I was wondering how you think that indigenous land stewardship plays effect in the loss of native plants or contributes to conservation of native plants. Because in indigenous communities, we always talk a lot about how this land stewardship method is really beneficial for native plants. But then I always think about, it does clear away the flowering plants and does scorch a lot of the land. Even though it's like low intensity fires. So how do you think that might play in the effect of like long-term and short-term effects?
Yeah, well, I've specifically worked with some of the Chumash people in Santa Cruz Island. So they don't do burning as much there, but they do a lot of land management. And that's through removing a lot of the invasive plants. And one thing that I've noticed throughout the years is not only in the invasive plants decreasing, but it's increasing a lot of the native pollinators as well. So I think with fire ecology, one thing that's really important, and I don't know if on the mainland people are doing this as much, but paying attention to what regrows after the fire comes back, because a lot of plants are fire followers. So if the plants that come back first could be like a poppy, or it could be like a lupin instead of a mustard plant, because like if a mustard plant comes back first after the fire, it'll basically suffocate everything else out. And there'll be a lot less native plants and a lot less native pollinators in those areas as well. So I don't work with people as much on the mainland, but I would definitely say if they incorporate fire ecology with plant ecology or restoring habitats, then I think they're doing really amazing work. But yeah, I definitely think indigenous people, they're examples that we need to follow. And I feel like a lot of times we sort of look at the work they're doing, but without understanding it or without getting them involved or letting them lead their own restoration is one of the reasons we have issues like the fires that we had earlier this year, with just all these invasive grasses that can carry through the wind and burn miles away. But yeah, I definitely think it's good to listen to the people who were here first, because they lived here for centuries without creating the destruction to the ecosystems that we're currently experiencing.
Hi, Krystle.
Hello.
Of these 26 bees, which was the hardest to track down, and how did you feel when you finally did it?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know which one was the hardest to, well, I guess, you know what, the YB. I feel like the YB was the hardest to track down, which was another Perdita that was a specialist. And the reason why that was so hard is because I think it was the third year of a drought that the first time I was looking, and it was actually at the Kelso Dunes. So it was just very dry there. And what I didn't realize at the time was there was about maybe 4 to 6 bee species that looked almost exactly the same, specifically from the front, and they had the exact same phenology. They would show up midday when it was about 100 degrees. They looked the same. They visited the same flower. And I actually didn't realize I'd photographed the wrong bee for about 2 years. And what's kind of funny is my friend Doug, I think he's here. Oh, you're right there. Okay, you're in the front. Yeah, so the bee's actually named after him, and I was so excited that I found and photographed the bee. I actually printed off a picture and gave it to him, and found out 2 years later it was the wrong bee because I didn't look at it from behind. So I ended up going back, and it was a year when there was just a super bloom, and so many more bee species appeared. And I found the one that I was looking for, and ended up giving him a picture of a bee that was actually named after him. But yeah, that one was pretty difficult just because it was in an area where there was no reception, and I had to memorize the key. And the bees are really small. They're about 3 millimeters. So you really have to get on the ground and just stare at them from behind.
Thank you.
Hi. Congratulations on your book. That's incredible.
Thank you.
How many years did you work on it?
I started unofficially, I would say, Black Friday 2018, because that's when I got my camera. But I didn't actually photograph the A bee until I think it was like late summer 2019 at the Crescent Farm. So that was my official start. Yeah, and then I got the last photo. It was actually this year in March, I think. It was with the ivy again, because the yard that bee was photographed in, it was in Altadena, and the house actually burned down. So I ended up going back because the bee shows up in March. And it's like, let me see if it comes back, and the flowers regrew, and the bee came back. So literally just finished this year.
I think we have time for one more question.
Wow, I better make it good, huh? I'm not too sure. You answered one of the questions I was going to ask, which was about honeybees and how that interacts with your study of native bees, but you answered that one. So I've got another story and question I'm trying to work out. Is NPR did a coverage about bumblebees, and I think in California. And I think that was the one that they were saying that they were noticing with climate change that the flowers were coming out earlier and the insects weren't catching up with that. And also with climate change, the heating, that the flowers were starting to go higher, or the insects were going higher. I can't remember exactly. Have you got anything to contribute to that? Have you noticed different, what the flowers coming out earlier or going higher in elevation or something?
Yeah,
like that?
so that's actually I can give you a really long answer to that, but I'm going to try not to. So I'll just say the first time I actually noticed a severe change was, I want to say it was 2022. I think that was the third year of a drought. And I also hadn't been seeing a lot of endangered bees, rare or endangered bees, up until that point. For some reason, the third year of a drought, Bombus crotchii, which is one of the endangered bees, made a big return. So did Bombus sonoris, which I think is a threatened bee. But yeah, there's a lot of bees that just came out of diapause that year. And there wasn't a lot of resources. A lot of them did disappear the following years. But right after that year, 2023, we had a super bloom. And you would think, okay, there's so many more flowers here, the bees should pop up at the same rate as the flowers. And I noticed there didn't seem to be equal. A lot of those bees seem to just still be gone or disappear again. But yeah, it's really interesting because especially in desert ecosystems, I feel like I notice it the most. There's certain years when we'd get rain before, like I think it was Hurricane Hillary, and all the flowers would bloom really early. And then we'd also start to see some of the bees return early as well. But then it was a little too early for the warmth of the year. So I think it was in, where was it? I can't remember. It was in the Mojave Desert. But after the flowers bloomed, we had like snow and everything froze. And then the rest of the year, there were no bees. I did start to see the plants come back, but there was nothing on them. So that was a year where we just didn't see a lot of pollinators. And I do think these like pendulum swings that are going back and forth, I'm not sure if the fauna that has relationships with them are able to keep up with those swings. It has been documented, though, that I think the longest an adult bee has ever been in diapause or kind of a hibernation was like 10 years. So if the plants do disappear for a while, the bees can come back. But if they don't come back in the correct timing, those bees might not have enough time to develop their offspring or find mates, or there might be lower populations, or maybe that 10 years runs out and there's no plants available. It's really more of a conversation than like an answer I can give you, because it's definitely impacting them, and we're definitely seeing populations decreasing. That year, I think 2022, when I saw them come back, it just kind of seemed like a Hail Mary year. Like maybe they just ran out of resources below ground, so they just came out. And my follow-up question to that would be, did they pass away because there weren't a lot of resources? Is that why some of the populations just completely disappeared? Or like what was happening? So I know that's kind of like a run-on answer, but yeah.
But I think it's very appropriate to end with another question. So, because there's always more to keep on learning and discovering. So thank you so much for everything that you have brought for us today. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, yes.
And I hope you'll join us for a little reception afterward. We'll see you out there in a minute. So thank you.
Thank you.